come back to ESG in a minute, because I think that's actually something that's quite relevant to a lot of people, and the direct link to law is not. I mean, yes, it becomes obvious if you think a little bit about it, but it's not obvious from the beginning. But let's talk a little bit about you, and probably also about SMP. Like, how did you end up in a law firm? I mean, you studied law, obviously, but is that something like, also because we have some people that are looking for job orientation, is law going to be something that's going to be automized by AI, or is there still going to be relevance in the future? So as a career advice, would you still study law today? Do you still think it's going to be relevant in the future going forward?
Absolutely. I think, a lot of what we do is strategic advice. Having said that, there are definitely going to be portions that can be automized. And to be quite frank, those are not necessarily those parts of my daily work routine that I enjoy the most. So I'm actually very much looking forward to there being more tasks automated. I think it's actually not going to start off necessarily with law firms. I think in in-house legal departments, there's probably a lot more in terms of tasks that can be automated. But when it comes down to the really complicated stuff, and also, as I said, providing strategic advice experience on how to run a transaction, negotiation strategy, I think that's the parts where it's going to be artificial superpower that eventually will replace us, but I think that's still quite some time away. So yes, definitely, if you're looking to go into law, I think it's great, and venture capital law in particular provides great opportunities to as a young lawyer, work internationally, work with the client directly from the beginning onwards, of course, together in the team or as part of a team. But I actually enjoy it a lot. I think it's, and well, I guess we'll talk about that in a minute a little bit, but also understanding about business models and understanding what the client does is really very interesting. And maybe one last thought, it's also great because it really allows you to try to understand the bigger picture and understand about business models, yet you're really an expert on something. When providing career advice, or thinking back when I started, I always worried in a way that, yes, it's great to be a generalist, but it's also great to have something you're really knowledgeable at. You're the online marketing expert, and there's it's, I think it's always good, or for me, I've always enjoyed to despite being curious and wanting to learn about things, to really have something where you're an expert in, and that's great in the law.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's like, also as you said, for me that has always been online marketing, and especially if you have a tendency to be insecure overachiever type person, it's always good if you have at least something where you have that's at least hopefully relevant. I mean, there's some things that you can be really strong at that are not that relevant, but I would definitely agree with that. Talking a little bit about SMP, I mean, I don't know whether there's been any other law firm, at least in Germany, growing that quickly in this kind of area. I mean, you were founded 6-7 years ago, maybe?
Actually, just over 3 years.
That's true. That's true. No, it's just because we work with the same people.
That's right. We worked previously in our old firm. Yeah.
But just and you have like 80 lawyers now, or 70 or something.
Yep.
And it has really developed in a great kind of way. Can you describe a little bit why you actually found? I mean, all of you guys were on very good tracks to develop your own kind of career within existing law firms. So what does SMP do different, and what are the things you specialize on, or the fields that you're very active in?
So our firm specializes in corporate, meaning M&A transactions, venture capital, financing around capital raises. We do fund structuring. We structure venture capital funds. We do tax and corporate litigation. Now, why did we start SMP, and why did we start our own firm? I think a lot of it was culture. We really wanted to build an organization the way we wanted it, and also doing something ourselves, and being flexible, being agile, not being necessarily part of a larger organization, but really developing our own practice, that was a strong desire. And it's as you said, it's been quite the ride. We've grown very fast, and that whole experience actually brought us a lot closer to our clients. In many ways, we're a startup ourselves, and I guess as a partner in a law firm, you're always an entrepreneur in the sense that you need to fill your own desk and you need to go out and find your work and develop your own business. Having said that, actually starting a firm is a different animal, because suddenly you're not only busy with your own desk, but you actually need to think about the organization, which to you, this is probably something not news at all, and it's something that every single one of your portfolio companies is facing. But for most lawyers, they would rather grow up in mature organizations and not be involved in managing growth and managing or devising a structure, an organizational structure, and deciding as to when to bring in external managers. And that really has been amazing, and a large part of the work that I really enjoy, aside from client work and the actual legal work, because that's all news, and working with teams, and that's really been a fascinating aspect, which, as I said, brought us a lot closer to a lot of our clients. And it starts with small things. It starts with building up cash flow and toilet paper. Either you buy it yourself, or you find somebody who is going to buy it, or you run out. It's quite simple, but stuff like that.
Especially in these days, having toilet paper enough in the office is not as normal as it sounds. Yeah. One thing that, and I think another aspect of that, and I think that's also ties a little bit in what you said earlier. I mean, what you expect from a law firm or from a lawyer is not somebody that, just shows you all the risks involved in a legal problem, but kind of behaves like a entrepreneur. Yeah, because in essence, I mean, you need advice as an entrepreneur. What should I do now in that position? And you can never find the perfect solution or the risk-free solution. There's no such thing. So people that can, put themselves into their shoes is definitely something. Also on the legal side, is I think what are the risks that you can take, or you should take, or you have to take? I mean, a lot of risks you have to take. Yeah, and it's always not great if things go wrong, but I think there's no risk-free kind of entrepreneurial activity. I think that's for sure. Can you describe a little bit? I mean, who are the clients you're mainly working for? And is it mainly funds? Is it mainly startups? Is it a combination? Do you also work for larger corporates now? Can you just describe a little bit of who the area of clients are?
Yeah, so it's actually a bit of everything. I guess we do quite a bit of work on the fund side, which is partially due to the fact that we're also active in fund structuring. So also on the transaction side, we oftentimes end up working for the same clients and doing deals for the funds that we structured. Then we also do a lot of work for international venture funds. So, for example, Lightspeed, one of your guests today, is one of our clients, one of our international clients. And that's also a lot because we do get referrals. If somebody wants to do their first deal in Germany, chances are they might call you because they know you, and they say, who are your lawyers? And then we get a recommendation. But we also do a lot of work on the company side. And sometimes, which, is probably one of the greatest experiences for us, is that we initially do some work for an investor, and then the company likes the way that we work. And even though we were technically on the other side, they still enjoyed working with us, and eventually we get asked to work for the company. There are some serial entrepreneurs with whom we've been for a number of years, and we've been together with them basically on virtually any company that they incorporated. But we also do some work for corporates, and that's mainly corporate venture capital activities, which is getting really big. Very interesting field, and most of us, my partners and I, have a background in big law. So we used to work for large international law firms, and that actually helps when dealing with larger financing rounds, but also corporates. They can be a little more complicated, obviously, in their decision-making processes, and you need to understand those. And I guess it helps having worked with blue chips in the past if you want to do some work for them on their corporate venture capital activities.
I mean, for the startup founders that are here in the round, or people involved in startups, what are your recommendations, or what is your view on how to find the right law firm for a startup in a given stage? I mean, obviously, yes, getting recommended a law firm is always something that's good. But if you are, I don't know, a large startup like Zalando, you might be working for them, yeah, and you get a recommendation, but that might not be the best fit for pre-seed, early stage startup. So, do you have any guideline on how to find the right law firm for you at a given stage? I mean, how would you approach this if you were a founder and you didn't have a clue? And yeah.
So I think that's actually asking the right question. If I may just briefly comment on that, because you're not saying how do I find the right law firm, but you're asking how do I find the right law firm for me at the time, because that may change.
Yeah.
And we may not be the right law firm for you, depending on what you want to do or which development stage you are at. So I think, first of all, you may need a number of law firms. That's maybe the first learning. Yes, it might be convenient to go to a lot bigger law firm that has a wide offering, and you can do labor law, and you can do data protection, and you can do your financing rounds. Now, I'm sure there's great law firms out there that do provide great advice on all these fields, but it's difficult to maintain the same level and the same standard of advice on each and every of these areas of law. And then those firms tend to be bigger firms, and even if you're willing to pay their rates, and maybe they might even offer some good startup packages, but bear in mind that you might be a very small number, and you might not get the attention that you deserve for your money. So I think that would be my first piece of advice, is to not necessarily look for one firm, but look for a few selected firms. It's okay. I mean, I appreciate that, some people working in-house, they're saying, I don't want to have a zoo of law firms. That's fully understood. It doesn't have to be 7 or 8 firms. You don't want to explain your business model over and over again. But it probably makes sense that if you're a startup and you might have some regulatory needs, and you might have some labor law questions, and there might be some data protection and some corporate law work, which is mainly what we do, then I think it actually makes sense to look for a few firms, and ideally those firms know each other and they can work together. But again, you might be better off going to smaller boutique law firms. Sure, I'm also saying that because I'm in a smaller setup, but I'm honestly convinced that for a smaller organization, it does make sense. I'm not just saying that because we are a specialized, focused law firms. And then to the second,
and that's actually a learning we have in similar settings in other fields as well. Yeah. I mean, for example, we also tend to work. I mean, if you're able to identify individual experts for certain tasks, like in advertising, is yes, you can go to the largest advertising agency out there. But if you just spend 50,000 euros on a TV commercial, then you probably won't get the best service, but rather the intern with some oversight. Yeah. So so I think if you're willing to go the extra effort in identifying and managing this, then I think it's a very similar pattern. And we always recommend to startups, try to find somebody where you at least, if you're not important today, where you might become important in the future, and people see that potential, because then they will get engaged. I mean, it was when we got started as a fund, we were okay-ish attractive, but I guess also the people saw the potential in us and basically also invested in the relationship, and I think it's probably similar here. But sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. I mean, it makes perfect sense. You don't want to be the smallest client of your service provider. I think it's quite simple as that. So yeah, and then I think to the second part of your question, well, so that there was sort of the structural, or the question as to the structural setup, and then the question is, how do I find the right firm? And I think really asking other founders, asking other fund managers, that really helps. I mean, yes, there are some rankings, and some of them are better, some of them are peer review, and some of them are based on client feedback. So it's not like they're all bullshit, but I think actually asking people whom you trust and is a very good way. And usually, there are Slack groups and alumni networks that people heavily use, and I would recommend to use those to get some advice. And then finally, I think it's important that you can actually establish a good working relationship. So as a last step, I would then maybe interview a couple of firms and see whether you can connect, because ultimately we need to be trusted advisors of our clients. Ultimately, those issues that we're dealing with, they're really important. And if we don't manage to get a lot of trust from our clients, or if our clients don't trust us, then we shouldn't actually be working together.
Mm-hmm.
So if you looking for an attorney feel that you cannot establish that level of trust, then you really shouldn't be working together.
Mm-hmm. Just because picking one of the sessions you had today, I mean, this ESG thing is really big. I mean, for us, as fund, I mean, first of all, we have a problem because we are like 5 male middle-aged partners, some older.
Sounds somewhat familiar if you look at our firm
we
setup.
definitely have to diversify there, and we're working on that. And the investment team is already, but that's just a small aspect of ESG, obviously. But how do you guys help? Like, what's your view? I mean, how can companies, also startups, prepare for this? And how can they actually also benefit from this? And how can you guys help there? Because, I mean, it's obviously not something, I was doing a little joke about it, but it has a deeper core that actually makes a lot of sense and makes companies better if they do it right. I mean, how do you accompany companies there? And can you derive like any recommendations in that sense?
Sure. So I think our activities are very much twofold at the moment in this field. So first of all, we actually do a lot of work for impact funds. We structure a lot of impact funds. So this really seems to be gaining momentum. And that also links in with your question, what's in for a company? Why should I care about ESG? Well, first of all, there's going to be a lot of ESG investors. So that's probably one way of, in the future, attracting or attracting capital, really. Mm-hmm. The honest answer is I'm deeply convinced that we should all care. It's our world. It's the world of our children. But beyond that, there's really, I think there's also a business case. A lot of venture funds, like Atomico, for example, one of our clients, they have an ESG policy which they require every portfolio company to implement. There's Leaders for Climate Change that provide some sample clauses. It's actually a lot of the activities that we see on the level of the portfolio companies or of your portfolio companies is driven by investors starting to ask these questions and starting to look for opportunities to deploy their capital where it may actually make an impact. Mm-hmm. And obviously capital can be a scarce resource. Yes, it's more readily available now on early stage level compared to a few years ago, but fundraising may be difficult. So you may want to think about that as generating funds as a business case. I guess ultimately, if you look at some evidence at some studies, they actually show that, and most of that is done for public entities because it's easier to track. Yeah. But actually, companies that invest in corporate governance and that have a strong corporate governance, they perform better. Mm-hmm. It's not just anecdotal evidence, but it's actually empirical evidence suggesting that there's a very strong financial case for caring about ESG. And I mean, I must say that I had very few touch points with that topic, maybe up until 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think it's and obviously it hasn't stopped, but it's gaining so much momentum at the moment that I would really recommend portfolio companies, startups, growth companies to look into that matter more deeply. I think also coming back to your question or what we discussed earlier in terms of people looking for jobs or looking or thinking about what they want to do, I think this is going to be a really interesting field on so many levels, not just for lawyers, but really for everybody. If you want to specialize, and again, touching on what we discussed earlier in terms of becoming an expert in a field, I'm super confident that this will be one of the topics that will keep us busy on all levels in the next years.
Yeah, if even somebody like BlackRock puts it in their like annual shareholder letter, they haven't been really the company you would have associated with ESG in the past, then I think it's time for you to, or for everybody to think about this. Yeah, thanks a lot for your time. Actually, there's a session on strange cases in European venture capital happening right now. So if you want more from SMP, and the great colleagues from Benjamin, you can just switch the session on Run the World. That's quite easily done. And if you want to reach out to them, you can obviously just get to their website. Benjamin is also on LinkedIn, so you can contact him there, or otherwise we'll pass you on if you have any questions.